commissioners are present. Extra announcements are on the back table by the door. I'm looking for comments not on this agenda.
So, Mr. Chair, since we don't have an add-on section, I have a very timely piece that I need to make certain that I present to you and get approval for signature specific to a letter I drafted on behalf of the Grand Ronde tribe to Senators Wyden and Merkley, copying Tribal Chair Kennedy and the Tribal Council specific to support for Senate Bill 3126, amending the Grand Ronde Reservation Act to address hunting, fishing, trapping, and animal gathering rights of the Confederated Tribes and for other purposes. Tribal folks have been asking us for a support letter for more than a month, and I've been trying to do the appropriate research to make certain that we're not wandering off into something we don't fully understand. I know Commissioner Morthorst has talked. I don't know if you've talked with anybody specifically, but Commissioner Gordon, but I wanted to make certain that whatever language we put together wasn't asking for something that was special, specific that others might not get. And so I've drafted this letter of support on behalf of the board, and I would like to get consideration for approval to sign and get it out the door to them today if possible.
I did have a chance to read it. It's a great letter, and I fully support the bill, so I'll move to approve the letter as presented.
And I'll second that motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you, Commissioner Pope.
That concludes my business.
Next up, we're looking for approval of agenda.
So move.
And I'll second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. And approval of minutes for February 9th.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. And approval of consent calendar.
So move.
I'll second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. So next up is department head update. We have Dr. Noel Carroll from Health Services today.
Thank you. It has been a while since I've been over here to actually present. And in fact, I've never presented to two of you. So I've taken a stab today of giving you kind of a high level overview of the current state of the three major department areas that I work in, which is behavioral health, developmental disabilities, and public health. At any point that you want to take it a different direction, dive deeper into something or just move us along, feel free to do so. I'm also happy to come back at a later time and we can just devote more time to a single topic area or whatever question you have. Hoping that I got kind of in the ballpark of what you're needing, but we will fix it as needed. Otherwise, if it's okay, I'll just kind of walk through the high points that I've put together and we'll just go from there. Okay, so I've started with public health, starting with just some of the recent changes and the things that are coming up on us quickly. The main one is a transition in the way we're using our WU team, which has been doing the contact tracing. I know Jackie told you all recently that the requirements for contact tracing have changed and we no longer follow up on all of the contacts and notify. So instead, what we've done is retask that team to set up a warm line for the community. So as they have questions related to COVID, do they need to quarantine? Do they need to get tested? Where are the testing sites? All of those kinds of things. We have a warm line that's set up during business hours that's being maintained by that team at WU. So we're working through the logistics with that and getting that up and running. And it is up and running at this point and going really well. So that's what's happening with COVID at the moment. The other big happening that's soon to come upon us is the indoor masking mandate going away, set to expire on March 31st. The thing that I wanted to point out, particularly to the board that could have impact locally, is that masking mandates and recommendations will fall back to local control at that time. So I'm sure that you're going to be getting some questions as far as what recommendations are we going to have on a local level. Particularly where schools and local businesses come in, they're going to have the ability to enforce their own masking recommendations and mandates. For schools, that gets very tricky because if they decide not to have a universal masking mandate in their school setting, then they're not going to be eligible for the test to stay policy.
You should move that closer to you.
It says not to. That's okay?
Well, those things I might not hear you.
Perfect. So that's going to be something for the schools to take into consideration when they're trying to decide their own masking policies, so that the implication is if they don't have a test to say policy in place, that kids or staff who end up being excluded will be excluded for longer periods of time.
Yeah, and so do you have any sense of what, again, it's political nonsense, but how long this test to stay mandate is going to hover over these families?
I don't. I haven't heard any.
And the real science behind any of it in collaboration with local public health? No, there isn't any. No.
Well,
Sorry, I had to squeeze that in there,
To
but
be fair, Commissioner, we know that I'm the wrong person to ask on that at this point.
I get it.
So I'm kind of bringing the high level overview. We can bring back the people that are the topic area specialists if we want to dive deeper on those. As far as the forecasted growth or funding for public health, the largest area of that is in modernization. We recently submitted and were approved for a regional and public modernization plan that had a significant amount of funding that went with that. The plan is going to require us to deliver upon 3 plans, one being an all hazards preparedness plan, a regional climate adaptation plan, and a health equity assessment plan. We have made a tentative decision that we're going to hire a consultant to complete those plans for us out of that budget that we were approved for. But we are still working through some conversation with Marion County about where it might make sense to just collaborate together on one or more of those plans. So we haven't finalized how that might roll out. In addition, there are 2 positions that we plan to hire with these funds. One will be a CD modernization supervisor and a health equity coordinator. There's some additional funds that we're going to carve out of this as well to help backfill some of our short positions. We are looking at, again, collaboration with Marion on sharing a medical director. We have a medical director who has been with us for a number of years who would really like to stop carrying that role for us. He'd really like to retire for real, but trying to get somebody to work the number of hours that we need is difficult because it's not very many. And they have just recently hired a new medical director, so we're trying to see if it makes sense for them to support us for just the limited time that we need for that role. And we're also talking with Yamhill County, as well with a collaboration with all 3 counties about the potential to put in to have a regional CD investigator that would be housed at Yamhill, but we would all kind of chip in to have that. So when these high-level communicable disease investigations come up, that we tap that position to do that investigation on our behalf. Those kinds of investigations tend to be very rare when they come up and very time-consuming and tend to take everybody offline. So if we had a position that kind of covered all 3 counties, that might be a better equity of scale for us. In addition, there's an STD CD grant that we were awarded for $90,000, and that's going to continue through 2025. So we'll be hiring a new communicable disease position out of that. As far as programming, I know that when Jackie has presented, she has been discussing some of the other programs within public health that have not been happening in the same way as they were previously, largely because COVID has redirected all of those staff to just doing COVID. I wanted to make sure that I presented it in a different way too, so that you could really see what that impact looked like. I think it's hard to sometimes conceptualize that when you're just hearing about staffing and how does it really fit into the big picture. So I literally wanted to give you a picture. I think the first thing that you're going to notice is on the left-hand side, we haven't been doing any of the home visiting services since May of 2021. And I want to make have you put a note on your handout as well. Underneath the universal home visiting on the far right, sorry, I made note the right, not the left. That program is actually not happening yet. That is slated to roll out this spring, but it's over there because basically what the universal home visiting program is that's new money, new programming that says that we need to meet with the family for every baby that is born to a family in Polk County. And then from there, when we assess them, we make an appropriate referral for them to receive services underneath these other home visiting programs that public health runs. So it's making sure that we're assessing for these service needs and helping that referral conduit happen in a much more open way. So there's funding coming in, there's a program that's been set up by the state. However, we haven't been running the programs that it will support. And the reason we haven't been running them is we cannot recruit the staff to run them. Our last nurse on that side left in May, and we have not been able to have a successful recruitment since.
And that would,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
that would be every child born in Polk County?
We would see the family of every baby born.
On or off of OHP, just, I'm curious what staff levels you would need to accomplish that.
Yeah.
Yep.
You were curious as well.
Again, though, one of the things that we have already been discussing is how do we do that with our partners in a way that makes sense? So whether we're partnering together and splitting it regionally, so are we talking about babies that are born within Salem Hospital being handled by primarily Marion County, where we're paying in a portion and our staff is doing a slightly different portion. We'll figure that out. But my best guess is that the staffing impact of that program coming on would probably only actually increase us 1 FTE. But we are currently down 2 FTE currently on that side that we have not been able to recruit for.
You see, knock on wood, if this reduction in COVID is a fact, could you redirect some nursing staff to this?
We don't have any nursing staff. We currently have 1 RN that is supporting all of the clinics in public health.
Okay. Wow.
And we just got her. And so if she goes away, and those are the programs on the left, immunization, reproductive health, and communicable disease, if she's not in place, the large majority of those cannot run either. So I really just wanted, I'm not trying to make it sound dire, but I do want you to understand kind of the difficult position that we're in, or the razor's edge that we've been riding. At some point, we're going to have to decide if we want to continue to be the service provider through public health for the community where these needs exist. We're going to have to figure out what we need to do differently to support it.
So is that Jackie's position on everything on the left?
Is this Jackie's?
Was that Jackie's?
No, none of this is Jackie.
Completely separate?
No, yeah. So, yeah, I'll walk you, in fact, if you wanted to, we can walk through the staffing that we're currently down. In order to, if you go to the next page, and I'll come back and catch us up on the things we missed, but underneath staffing concerns, you'll see a list. These are the positions that would be needed to return us just to the baseline staffing levels to fund or to staff our current clinic positions. We are now down a public health administrator, that's Jackie. We have been put on notice that the public health nursing supervisor will be retiring later this year. We are down 3 RN positions. That does not include the one that I'm anticipating being added with the new program. We received notification last week of a public health worker resigning. So that's an open position. And we're down 2 positions within the jail. So we have a significant problem that we're going to have to figure out how to solve. And it's not our problem alone, but I think there are some things that we are doing that we can look at changing that are unique to what we have tried to maintain within our county that we could look at changing and doing differently. So I'm going to be bringing some of those proposals to you over the next couple of weeks, and we can talk about those then, about if we're ready to make some of those changes or not. Some of those are going to be salary related. Some of those are going to be how we've tiered or structured the positions themselves, and see if those are changes we need to make. Backing up, there are some things that are good news. Our WIC program is going strong. They have been meeting with clients mostly by phone over the last couple of years. The nice side effect of that is that has dramatically improved our no-show rates in that program. So we've been actually contacting more families throughout that time. And we also lost our space, which because we were on the phone was okay for the time being over at OCDC. However, we have just recently carved them out a spot over at the Monmouth Clinic, which has been predominantly behavioral health. So we're going to be putting them there 3 days a week, and they're going to begin seeing some clients in the office there or using that as their home base to do the telephone work as needed, which is nice because over half of the WIC clients actually live in Monmouth Independence. We want to maintain that presence on the ground over there. We've also been talking to Brent somewhat about the future of potentially using part of his facility for WIC, because we could probably use our entire Monmouth site just for behavioral health. So if we can find a way to put them over where he's got some things happening, that might make sense too. Vital records is another part of public health. That is something that we've essentially absorbed just frankly into the rest of health services wherever we can put it right now. Public health doesn't have the ability to support this on its own. It's an administrative function. It's very tedious. It's tracking and administrative burden largely, but it's not clinical. So we've moved it where we have other staff right now who can absorb that, and public health is just not able to take that on, but we're making it work. Successes though, we have those too. The move we've made with jail medical, hiring a manager over there, has been a tremendous help, both in terms of morale for the remaining staff and I think for the jail. So that seems to have been a great hire. Michael's doing a great job. He's off to a really good start, and I've heard nothing but good feedback so far on him. So that's something I really appreciate that we receive so much support for. And back to our WIC program, I just wanted to highlight them. That team has been together for more than a decade. They are solid. They know what they're doing. And I think they're just a really strong point within that public health framework. So I just wanted to highlight them. We talked about the staffing that we have open, and then we already talked about the new funding that's going to bring on those new positions, so I won't go over that again. Any other questions you have about public health in particular at this point?
We're good.
Yep. Okay. Developmental disabilities is fraught with much better news. We'll take a reprieve and talk about good things. They just recently completed a quality assurance review with a lot of positive feedback. Primarily, they were very impressed that all the files were in compliance with current level of care assessments in place. A lot of places have not been able to keep up with that because there's been so much back and forth on whether or not we're able to actually access the clients that are in the homes at all. And staff have been, told to they can only do things by phone, or they have to go in the homes, and it's been very back and forth. So we've been able to keep that up. We've also been able to exceed the visit rates that were expected. And so the reviewers were just very, very impressed that they had been able to maintain the level of services throughout all of the ebb and flow of the last couple of years. Programming wise, the in-person monitoring is back in place. So our staff are going back into the homes, meeting with the clients, and doing the review of the facilities that we're required to oversee for licensure as well. That's where those staff are. I did want to point out, they are one of our most solid teams right now. They have been fully staffed for a while. 79% of their staff have been together in that program for the last 2 years. So as far as turnover, they are our bright spot. This last biennium, they did add 2 additional staff, as well as that bumped us up to a spot where we needed to add an additional supervisor. And there were some funding adjustments from the last legislative session that added that for the previous budget. As far as forecasted growth for their department, they've been telling us basically to continue to assume that we will see growth each biennium at about that same rate unless something changes, just based on the way that people are moving into the area. Unless something about the demographics change considerably, we'll see an additional 3, 4 staff potentially added each biennium. So just to kind of keep that in the back of our minds. And then there is some ARPA funding that ODDS, which is DD at the state, is wanting to obtain and distribute, and that's mostly going to be for infrastructure. We would likely see that come to us in the form of additional support person that would be designated for DD, and then potentially kind of a infrastructure grant that we'd be applying for. But that team is doing very, very, very well. They have had a couple of supervisors, a manager and a supervisor that have been together for the last few years. And I think that that team of leaders has really developed. And I think that's been the key. And I think that's why that staff turnover rate is really low. I think that's why that group has really settled down. And I just think that their leadership has really come through to just be something that we've really been pointing the rest of our teams to look at, and to look at their success, to look at what they're doing, how they're handling problems as they arise. I saw Matt nodding to that, but they're just doing a really great job. Any questions about developmental disabilities?
Well done.
They are doing a great job. Behavioral health. Save the fun for last. Interesting things happening here. The first thing I just wanted to show you is a fun little graph that'll show you that our new admission rates have finally returned back to where we were pre-COVID. And we've actually started to exceed that. So where we were at prior to the last couple of years was we saw about 170 new folks coming in each month. And in December and January, we exceeded that. So it's interesting to see that that's happened. What's even more interesting is to see where things are different about the people who are coming in at this point versus before. You see a lot of colors on your graph. The colors represent the programs they're seeking entrance into. So purple are people coming in that are youth, green are adults, the yellow down there are your people seeking addiction services. And then the rest is just specialized services. But what's interesting to me is that prior to COVID, the majority of folks coming in each month were for children's outpatient, which would have been the purple. And now you'll see that green, the adults coming in for regular outpatient services, are actually taking up the majority of that space. We're seeing that across the board, and we've been looking at the different areas or the different regions within the county, and it's consistent. Adults are reaching out for services at a much higher rate across the county than any other demographic. So it's good. People are feeling stress and people are reaching out for help. It'll be interesting for us to continue to push on why aren't the kids being served yet? Because we know that they're dealing with things that they're going to need help with too. But I'm guessing that that's partially because schools are back in session. So that's probably where some of that is getting addressed, but we're going to keep an eye on that. Okay, notable successes. I think one of the biggest things that when I asked my managers, I said, hey, the board wants to know how we're doing. What are we going to tell them? And they all came back immediately with, make sure you tell them what we pulled off this last year. And what they all were talking about was same-day access. So about a year ago, we decided to take a large leap off the cliff with something that we kept researching about, but nobody locally was doing, which was to just say, you know what? Everybody is always talking about how hard it is to get into behavioral health services. These people out, back east say it's not hard. You just say, come on in. We looked at their models. We did a bunch of research and we said, they seem to be pulling it off. Let's try it. So we did. And we basically have a system in place now that registration got pushed to online. We verify it same day, we give you a call, and as long as we get to you, as long as you registered before noon, we will see you that same day by 1 o'clock. And the worst case scenario is we call you back that afternoon and say, not today, call me any other day before noon, and you will be seen that day by 1 o'clock. And we've done it, and it has worked. And it has decreased the no-show rates, as you can imagine, significantly. Our no-show rates for that first appointment historically had been as much as 40%. And over this last year, it's 5%.
Great job.
And we have been able to maintain it. The biggest concern everybody has when you do that is, well, what if the whole county shows up today? They don't. And we have contingency upon contingency upon contingency built in, including myself at the very end of the line, who still is licensed to do this if I have to, that would be called if we ran out of people. I've never been called. And we've pulled it off. Now, will we always? I hope so, but we're going to keep an eye on it. Right now it's working and we're hugely excited about it. I included a client story because I think that's the fun stuff that we really get excited about. So I've written here, I'll briefly tell you that we had a mom come back and tell us her experience of it, where she had been trying to get her kid in, who was really depressed and she was getting really concerned, and she was calling all the agencies and they were all giving her the same routine that we'd all heard forever. 2 to 3 weeks, that's as soon as we can get you in. She stumbled upon our website and saw that we had the same day access thing, took a shot on a Sunday night, filled out our registration packet. Monday morning, got a call from us and said, come on in this afternoon. And 2 weeks later, when she would have been getting just in for the first time at any of those other agencies, he'd already been seen multiple times. They were in family services, individual services, and she was saying, everything is so much better. So to us, those are the things that make all the difference. And this is why we do the work. So gotta share the really good stuff too, because the rest of the year's been pretty tough in different ways, but this makes it all better.
Imagine that that helps with just stigma when people make that leap to ask for help and there are no barriers. The internalization of the stigma, I think, is lessened. I'm very supportive of reducing stigma. I firm belief that everybody needs mental health services. We don't want the whole county coming in at once, but
Right.
I think this is going to have some really great secondary effects on that. So well done.
Well, and I really wanted to, make you aware of what a leap of faith doing something like this was, and how impressed I was with the rest of our executive team that they were willing to do it, because this was going to fall on them if it all failed. And they trusted and they did it. And it goes to the fact that I think also that team, we've been working together. My executive team within behavioral health has been here a long time. I think we've all been working at least 10 years together. So that team has not turned over. And that's allowed us to develop a lot of trust. And that's very helpful when we decide to do big things like this. Areas of recent growth, supported employment has added an additional position. So that is exactly what it sounds like. It's actually a evidence-based program that actually when people come in and indicate they would like help with trying to obtain employment, we actually have a program that works with the employers to try to reassure them and to make them comfortable to employ people that they might not otherwise employ. So some of our clients are not people that might be the first people on their list. They might not look like the person that they might want to take that chance on. So we come alongside and we check in with the employer. We help the client to be in a place where they're going to be able to meet the expectations of that employment agreement and walk with them through that. And that has grown enough that we've been able to add an additional position. Children's Wraparound has added an additional team. That is something I wanted to point out only because it's not great news because of how it's happened. The reason we've had to add an additional team is because the services at the highest end, which is often the residential and those secure placements, have been eliminating beds. So we have a lot of kids who should be in those higher level placements who can't access them because there's no capacity. So that's forced us to expand our team at a level down here to try to support them. But they're not kids who necessarily should be at our level. And that's causing a ripple effect throughout our system because they're taxing our system throughout in a greater way to try to support them in the community when really they need a much higher, more intensive level of service than we're supposed to be equipped to provide. And our ACT services, we've talked recently about that, have been expanded to include the forensic population. That's going well. So a lot of growth in that more intensive set of services. Forecasted growth, there is a lot. As you know, this was one of the largest investments recently by the legislature that's ever occurred into behavioral health services. The behavioral health resource networks, we are waiting to find out what we've been awarded for that. We are supposed to find out on February 28th. That could bring us as many as 12 new positions if it's fully funded, and potentially have the need for us to purchase a building to put them in. So we'll find more about that soon. But the basis for that is for us to provide that low barrier addiction screening and service 24/7 to folks that are experiencing concern about addiction issues, and to give them a low barrier access into treatment options. Access to care, we have already been awarded funds. There's one of the themes you'll hear with as much money got pushed out and as quickly as it got pushed out, it's been clunky. And so even as money's been awarded, it hasn't been able to necessarily be used because the rules on how we go ahead and spend it continue to change. So we've had to hold up and hold up again, waiting for things to be updated. So this is one example of that where we've had to go back a couple of times and get clarification before we've actually been able to go ahead with hirings, but we anticipate still hiring up to 4 positions out of this. That will be providing supported employment and harm reduction services. Again, this is targeting substance use treatment and support. Mobile crisis funding, there are a couple of different variations on this coming out over the next couple of months. One will be coming out March, April timelines, and another one coming out May, June for expansion for mobile crisis. So I expect that the next time I come back to talk to you, that'll probably be a primary focus of what we're discussing, is what's happening with that. And then the one that is the hot topic for today, we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute, is aid and assist. So the state has just released an RFP for $15 million to CMHPs to increase capacity for community restorations, with the intention that we're going to divert people from going into the court system at all. At first glance, we just watched webinars in the last couple of days on this from the state. We can conceptualize probably 3 positions that we would ask for out of this, that we would be using to work more closely with corrections. And as you know, we've been locating a couple of folks over in their offices already. So we're going to be talking with Jody and trying to figure out how we might get ahead of that. But that's just come out in the last couple of days. So for behavioral health, there's been some staffing success. I think we have been getting a lot of feedback from our neighboring counties and from some of the other partners that we work with, that we should take a lot of pride in the fact that we have had a much lower turnover rate than a lot of our neighbors have experienced. So while we have had a lot of frustration with trying to recruit new positions, like everybody else, we have had to deal with less of that because we've retained a higher level of our employees. And I think that we feel really, really good about that. I think that speaks to the fact that that executive management team has been very stable over a number of years. So they're very solid, they're very calming and reassuring to the staff. They're very practiced in their leadership, and there's ability to provide a lot of reassurance to the folks during times that have been very turbulent recently. And I think that it just goes to their credit.
And the folks comprising that executive management team, who is that? Carrie and others?
That'll be, yeah, generally who I'm going to speaking to is Carrie Blum, Jennifer Leaf,
Okay.
Kristen Beck, Tammy Stump.
Thanks.
Yeah. And then we do, of course, have some concerns and some challenges. I think the biggest challenge for behavioral health in particular has been what I would sum up in a nutshell as administrative burden, but it's more than that. The demands with every bit of money we get is track this, monitor that, prove this, show me the data. It's for every dollar we receive, it feels like 10 cents goes to a client. You know, and 90 cents goes into what should be proving that we spent the 10 cents the right way. And we haven't done that, whether that's my bad or not. But it is at this point, combined with the growth rate we're experiencing, causing us significant issues. I think there's a transition in our organization. We've gone through this a couple of times because of the rate of growth that we've had. You know, we went from, for a while, my mantra was between 2007 and 2013, we grew by 65%. Well, that was massive. Well, I think between 2013 and now, we might have done it again. I haven't looked at that data. But with each one of those, you have to change the way you're designing your organization. It can't work the same way. We've gone from mom and pop to small organization to now what is probably small medium organization. And they have to work differently. We can't have the same person wearing 10 hats, because at some point it becomes very inefficient because they're not good at all those things. And you become large enough, you need to begin to specialize, because you need to stop having the person that does, you know, that's working with the client needs to stop putting up the paint and building the wall, because they really stink at building walls, and we have enough walls that need attention. We need to find somebody who builds a wall the right way. And that's kind of what's happening with data and tracking and all of this. So we have two main areas that we're really suffering at this point, and I'm using that word somewhat purposefully, and it's within our ability to manage the administrative demands of what these programs are bringing. So what's happened on the program side of that is we have collapsed things and partially not been able to rehire the quality of staff to put them back. So, and this has happened over time. And as I was putting this together, there were a couple of positions I didn't even realize that we had forgotten about. So we have managers and supervisors covering multiple departments to the point where it's probably not effective. And that happened because we failed a couple of recruitments, couldn't hire, and basically just stopped trying and just kind of said, we got to just get back to work. And so we just have let them keep working. Well, eventually we're going to lose them because we're going to burn them out. We're going to have like what happened with this person in public health who just last week left. We went straight to him and said, what do you need? Do you need a different schedule? Do you need what? We need a different position that has different money in it? What can we make happen? He said, I need to go work construction. I'm done. I need out of here. Now that's a different scenario, but I'm worried that this toll that we're placing on folks will have a similar impact. So I'm mindful of that. You know, I've got key positions where I literally have managers where I've just handed things and then we've just gotten back to work. And now I'm seeing the impact that's playing out in ways that are not going to be helpful for us down the road. You're talking about these folks that you're even seeing we've stretched too thin. I agree. How do we hire the kind of quality person that we're going to need, though, to come in to support that? I'm going to be giving that a lot of thought, and I might need your help with figuring out how we're going to do that. So that's been one problem. The other problem is we've tried multiple times to recruit for help within the administrative data analytics, business management side of things, and have not been successful. We have a couple of us wearing many hats within that. And while personally, I enjoy a lot of those pieces, what that means is when I'm covering what's probably the equivalent of, and this isn't about me, but this is actually my failure in that I should have resolved these issues sooner. I'm probably covering what should be maybe 4, 5 other positions within that realm because I happen to have skills within that realm. But that means that those staff are working 1 day a month, 2 days a month. And because of that, we're not getting very far. So we're going to need to go back and figure that out. You know, and just to give you an example of kind of, I think this is striking. I hope this strikes to you, but I went through and counted. We have a massive spreadsheet that tracks the administrative meetings we're required to do that are external, just for behavioral health. There are 74 external meetings that are monthly.
77?
74. And then here I put most of them are monthly. Well, I went back and looked, and there were a couple that were quarterly and a couple that were weekly. So I figured we can just call them all monthly. They balance. That's just behavioral health, and we see, and you see the same thing in the other 2 areas.
Imagine your counterparts in other counties are dealing with the same.
Oh yeah.
Burden. What are some of the conversations with the state agencies that you interact with? you must be talking to them
Yes.
about this, like,
Yes.
great program. How do we implement this with current?
Yeah.
So I'm just curious how those conversations went and how we can help advocate from, the legislative end with our, state delegation.
Yeah, I will say the state has made some gestures to try to relieve some of that. There was an effort a couple of months ago between AOC and HP, which was my fellow directors working with OHA to say you've got to get rid of the reporting requirements, some of the tracking. They went through and said, okay, great, we're going to pause a lot of this and a lot of that. We have at the state, one of the issues is the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's up to.
Right.
So while they're stopping it here, they're not stopping it over here. So we can't stop because you've said you don't need this, but I still have to track everything because they're going to still need that. And I still have to track it because they need it. So how do we stop it? I don't know. It's a runaway train at this point. We're going to have to figure out how do we assure the public that there is oversight and accountability for public dollars being spent on investments without spending 90 cents of every dollar that we gave them on telling them how we spent it. And until we can resolve that at that level, I don't know how we translate it down to helping me at my level. So I understand that push-pull.
I think the burden is on those state employees as well, trying to get these dollars out. That Acute Care Advisory Committee grant for housing and with the to serve the co-occurring mental health and addiction folks. We met with the OHA person and they said, yep, we're way late on this.
Mhm.
And we're going to be very forgiving in terms of your application, et cetera. So it's up and down the chain, I would imagine.
And up and down the chain is interesting that you say that because one of the other issues that we have is the state says, well, we're not going to require this of you.
Mhm.
But between us and the OHA, in a lot of areas, it's the CCO. So OHA still requires it of the CCO. Do you know where the CCO gets their data? Downstream. So we get stuck there.
And of course, the other problem is you have a contract you signed.
We do.
So they can give you all the rhetoric they want, but at the end of the day, you got to honor the contract.
Yep.
Right? So you don't get to circumvent a process because they're sympathetic, when you have a contract in place.
Yeah.
That's the advice we get. So
So
it's real.
So even though OHA, I think, has taken some steps to try to alleviate the administrative burden, it's so deep and so thick and there's so many tentacles. I haven't felt any relief. In fact, in one example, OHA said, we're going to take away this particular reporting requirement. You don't have to do this for a period of time. We said, no, this doesn't sound right. We're going to keep our infrastructure in place and keep doing this and let's watch what happens. Within a period of 3 months, the CCO was handed the requirement, turned around. This had gone from previously a quarterly requirement. They said, don't do the quarterly requirement. The CCO 3 months later said, you know what, you're right. We're never going to make you do this. The next month came back and said, never mind, it's now a monthly requirement. I mean, so it's just, and trying to track all this is just crazy making. Anyway, we could talk about that all day, but this is the piece that puts the entire behavioral health service delivery system in jeopardy of collapse. So not to be too dramatic, but it's a real concern. Okay, so legislative short session, what's happening out there? House Bill 4004 is workforce investment. Just wanted to make you aware. We talked about this a little bit a while back in a different form. It's coming back through. It's one-time funding directed to behavioral health workforce, meant as a bridge to prevent further destabilization of positions in workforce. I don't know if it will succeed or not. The reason I'm making you aware of it is to let you know that AOCMHP was trying to get ahead of your previous concerns and did request some assistance from county councils and HR to get ahead of some of the concerns that Board of Commissioners had been raising previously, and hopefully to resolve those if this money does make it through. So that would be one area that you might want to listen for those conversations and express any concerns that you have. There is.
This is a grant bill, by the way.
It is a grant bill. There is a discussion about the long-term fix, which is going to mean rate increases happening, but that's happening over in the Human Services Subcommittee right now. And the last thing that I heard about this bill is that it failed to vote on the House floor. So, and it was sitting in Ways and Means. So I'm not sure where it's at, but if it makes it through, then we're hoping that we can at least alleviate some of the concerns that were brought up before. Opioid settlement legislation is coming through. I think we're all aware that we will be receiving funds at some point for a few years as a result of that opioid settlement agreement. And we will certainly be we are putting some thoughts together about how we might be using that for the good of Polk County. So I'm just making you aware that that is ongoing conversation. System areas of concern, we have a couple of big ones. So I did leave these for the very end. One is something that could impact the funding for behavioral health, with OHP redetermination. The reason that this could be a problem is that a significant amount of our funding that is capitated. So anytime that we are given as part of our contract a chunk of money that we bill against that is based on a PMPM. So for every member who's on OHP that month who lives in Polk County, we get a portion of a penny, something like that. And so we're funded based on how many people are on OHP in Polk County. So if we go through a redetermination, all of these folks during the emergency declaration have not been required to prove that they should be on Medicaid. And generally we see kind of an ebb and flow throughout the years. People go through these redetermination processes. Some people get a new job. They no longer qualify because they make too much money. People forget to reapply, all kinds of reasons they go on and off. People have just been sitting on, and so it's been building. They're going to go through this redetermination, and we're anticipating that a significant amount of people are going to no longer be found eligible, which is going to rock our base funding. So we're anticipating that. We're not sure to what extent to anticipate it because we don't know what we don't know. And it probably won't hit us until 23. But we are having conversations with the CCOs and OHA, and we're all aware this is out there. So I just wanted to make sure that you were aware it was out there, and if you are encountering these conversations, that you had the context for how that would apply at home. Any questions about that one in particular? Okay.
No, I do have one, I guess.
Sure.
I think about it. Will there be, back to reporting, will there be a reporting process? Probably this comes from the CCO, I just don't see it, on what our historic enrollment has been OHP in the county, and for us to be able to see what that trend line is over the last 5 years.
It would come out of the CCOs, but yeah, we can definitely get that. We have that available to us if we want to look at that.
We probably should get that just as updates for the commissioners, because I'm not seeing it. So I don't know who to even ask at the CCO to get that information. Maybe it's being distributed through your channels, but I don't recall seeing it.
Yeah, I'm sure we're getting it at the Health Council. I
I think it's just important for us to understand, how many people do we have enrolled in OHP? What do those trends look like? COVID, no COVID, doesn't matter. We need to understand it.
Mm-hmm.
So, because to me, it's an economic indicator as well. So
That can be something I just standardly incorporate.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And if you saw the Lund report at all, have you seen these last couple? There is a risk sharing recommendation that is going, the reason that I put it under, well, I did put it under the legislature, I guess, but it could come up in the legislative conversations in the short session. OHA has said that they are concerned us getting a sponsor to bring it forward as a bill, but I don't know that they're able to do that at this point. But there's a recommendation out there to charge the counties $1,500 per day after 30 days for any patients that have been deemed not able to aid and assist in their own defense and whom Oregon State Hospital has deemed no longer meet a hospital level of care. There's so many things in play with this and so many things that are problematic with this. And I'm not even sure where you would like to begin with this conversation. So I guess I'm going to start at the beginning with, is there any need to, do you want me to discuss what aid and assist is? Or how somebody even gets to the hospital? Or do you want to know that, or do you just want me to dive into the problem with it?
My personal take is this is another whole subject for another meeting.
Okay,
We probably ought to have some more depth in. That's my position, and understand what that threat is when it gets closer to being a threat. Right now, I'm hoping that you and the cohort of folks that you're engaged with are pushing back on this.
absolutely.
Yeah, so
We're pushing against this. However, this does feed into, it kind of flows into the second one, which is really the theme. The theme around this and the last one, which is the OJD Behavioral Health Summit, is there's a coalescing of problems that have been caused by legal rulings, system changes, scarcity of resources, changing economic times. I mean, take all of the pieces together, and basically what you have is the court systems, the social service agencies, state entities, all being put into impossible situations and basically ending up pointing fingers at each other and not understanding each other's systems or their limitations. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what it is. I think everybody wants to serve the people that they're there to serve. And yet we've got to find ways to move beyond the finger pointing, to sit down and listen to each other and start to problem solve. And I don't think we're there yet. And I think that's what we're finding both with the recommendation that we talked about for us being charged for not getting people out. When we don't even have control over that at some points. That could be something that a judge has made a ruling on, something that we can't even make happen. And that's what was coming out of the Behavioral Health Summit, is kind of, well, you know, behavioral health is not doing what we told them to do without understanding there may be a legal requirement that prohibits us from doing it, or we may not control the system that you're telling us to do it within, or. And so I think that one of the things that I am very appreciative of Commissioner Moorhorse, is it's the group you're getting together to try to talk about some of those issues, build some of those relationships. I think if there's any assistance that can be offered to continue to try to support even within our county of developing those relationships better, we need to continue working on them, because we're going to need each other to solve all these problems.
You think more attention to that, the sequential intercept model might help reveal some of those gaps in a non-personal manner, more of the systems manner?
Yeah.
I don't know, but that's another program that would require a ton of capacity.
Right. And a ton of administrative time.
Yeah. I don't know if that's the approach, but
Yeah.
I also appreciate Lyle's leadership on that issue.
Yeah. Any other questions or anything about behavioral health? I know I've taken a lot of time.
So, Noel, you mentioned you're getting roughly 170 new clients a month.
Yes, sir.
What is the average length of time a client is with you until how many do you have in the works right now that you're actually consistently addressing on a daily basis, or until you release them?
It depends on, so the average length that somebody's with us depends on the program they're in. It varies widely. Right now we have probably around 1,600 folks that are actively being served. And then, outpatient services, it depends. There's a wide range. So your typical person that walks in the door that is doing okay and just needs your typical therapy services for a little while is probably only going to be with us for 3 to 4 months. Somebody who is needing case management services, peer support services, we're typically anticipating they'll be with us for a year. Somebody who's if they're coming in for DUI services, that's a prescripted period of time, and then you complete and you're out. I mean, so it really varies depending on the type of program. We have some programs that once you're in forever, and it's really a matter of us figuring out how often do you need checked on. So it's a wide range.
People.
What's the percentage of those folks that are commercially insured versus Oregon Health Plan?
Commercially insured is probably, it's less than 5%. It's probably closer to 1 to 2%. There's probably, I can bring that back to you if you really want that split out. You're probably going to find that it's, I bet you we're at least 60% Pacific Source, probably more than that. And then it's probably another 15% open card, still Medicaid. And then you're probably going to have a chunk that's indigent. So your indigent population, I'm sure your uninsured population is going to be higher than our commercial population. We have very little commercial.
Yeah, I just want to point out the distinction that when we talk about serving all, that doesn't necessarily mean we serve all. And again, the clients that come through the door generally on some sort of assistance, and those that are on commercial insured or just regular working folks don't use these services or don't apply for these services, and in fact have a very difficult time getting behavioral health services at all in this county.
At all, yes.
So I'm saying this somewhat for the record that there are still significant challenges in the behavioral health world in Polk County because of our lack of clinical options.
Mm-hmm.
So again, your team is buried all the time. I get that, and doing the best it can just to meet those thresholds for those folks that we must take care of. But for the rest of the world that don't fall into that category, they have a very difficult time as well finding services, and they seek them. I hear about it. I know you hear about it too. They're having a hard time getting those services met. To the point Commissioner Gordon made, we need behavioral health services for anybody that should have a need for them, and it can be very challenging. To the very first story you told, how hard it is for people to find it.
Yeah.
And again, if you've not been in a system and used to getting those services, especially, again, a lot of those folks come through A&D. But if you haven't been in that and you're having a crisis, it can be very challenging for a family.
What's my concern with the redetermination as well is that we're going to get folks who have now received employment enough. They no longer qualify for Oregon Health Plan, but not enough money that they're going to choose to actually buy a plan. And they're going to get more and more acute to the point where they now qualify or need one of our safety net services, which are much more expensive, which doesn't matter what insurance you have. And now we're going to be needing to serve somebody at a much higher, more expensive acuity level that we could have intervened with down here. And so I think we're going to see some system impacts like that down the road too.
Impacts on suicide rates, another.
Yeah.
Well, all of these concerns, especially to the last point you made about the state, thinking that there's some sensibility in charging the counties for aid and assist, that eventually it will drive more counties into a place where they'll just say, here, come get it. This whole program is yours.
Well, what bothered me the most, we had a very, very direct conversation with the state about that and said, what are you trying to do? We don't have control over these levers and these systems. Why would you be coming to us and holding us hostage for this?
Mhm.
And the best answer that they would give us, other than kind of a shoulder shrug, was, we're hoping that you will work with your partners and the people that do have control over those.
Yeah, well, it's just one more thing in my view that it piles on. I mean, I talk with county commissioners regularly about these kinds of things. And it doesn't take very many of these things piling on to put them in a place where they go, look, this just doesn't work. We can't do this. And we do have that option. And no, I'm not suggesting we have that option, but there are counties that say, come get it. Come get it. I'm not going to do this anymore. So it's, as you pointed out, it's very complex work. You know, you're in a place where it's very difficult to hire the level of professional staff you need to implement all of the elements that keep coming. And at some point, you know, every county is going to look at their business model and say, how does this actually work anymore? So thank you for all you do.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
And love any feedback about the level of, I mean, they give you a little bit more broad this time because we hadn't done it at all. So
I really appreciate it.
This is the intro course. Now we get into the rest of the syllabus.
And for the record, where your branches are in West Salem and Monmouth Independence, you definitely have a Polk County program. So you provide to where the people are, and that's much appreciated. And please tell your staff, thank you for what they do, the hours, the dedication. And I know Jackie's going to be a hard person to fill. Please take our thankfulness and gratitude to her and tell her good luck in the future. And we really appreciate it. She goes through some very difficult times with COVID and all the tracing and the hours that her and the team put in. So tell her, thank you very much. She'll be missed.
will do. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we need an executive session, sir?
Yes, sir. The board will now meet in executive session pursuant to ORS 192-660 sub 2E to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions.